Hi, everyone, and welcome to another season of Taiwan On. This is our podcast series presented in conjunction with Strike King Lure Company, Lou's Fishing, and the good folks at Hannay's Marine. I am Mike Frisch. I'm the host of Fishing the Midwest Television. We will be coming your way the next 13 weeks with this podcast series, relying on a variety of Strike King and Lou's pros. They will be our interview guests, our experts. We'll be talking a lot of topics. Walleyes, we'll talk panfish, and of course, we'll talk bass on several episodes as well. We will be fortunate to have with us some of the very best fishing pros in the country, names like Mark Zona. We've got Drake Hurd with us tonight. Drake is the National Walleye Tour Defending Angler of the Year. We hope to have Jason Shakurit, Greg Hackney, Wally Marshall, Mr. Crappie. So, we've got an all-star lineup of top pros and some really good topics, we believe, topics that we think anglers all across the Midwest and beyond will find helpful. This is Fishing the Midwest, so we do gear some of it to the Midwest, but we're going to try to keep our topics as generic as possible so that the things that we discuss are fishing techniques and ideas that anglers across the country can use. So again, I'm Mike Frisch. I host Fishing the Midwest Television. I'll be your host for the next 13 weeks. And just to let you know that we are just starting. We actually had our first film session yesterday, our first TV shoot, if you will, for the 2023 fishing season, the 2023 TV season of Fishing the Midwest TV. And actually, we were on Big Stone Lake yesterday catching largemouth bass, and we will have a special presentation of that episode coming up here in June. So just in a couple weeks here, we'll have that Big Stone largemouth episode on, and that'll be on Valley Sports North. And then it'll also be part of our regular first quarter run of the 2023 season. So when we get going in January for our 13-week regular run, that Big Stone episode will be part of that. So let's go ahead and get started. As I said, we're going to welcome in Drake Hurd tonight. Drake is, as I said, the 2021 National Walleye Tour Angler of the Year. Drake had an outstanding year last year, won that award by a wide point margin, and he is from Alexandria, Minnesota, and so right here in kind of in my backyard, and we're going to visit with Drake tonight about what we're going to call holiday weekend walleyes, because this is actually in preparation for the Memorial Day weekend, and walleyes are going to be a popular topic and a popularly sought species all across the Midwest here this coming weekend and for the next couple weeks. So Drake, welcome aboard.
Hey Mike, glad to be here, man.
Good, awesome, great to have you, sir. So Drake, before we start talking about a little bit about Memorial Day weekend and the coming fishing that we're going to see this coming weekend, tell us a little bit about your off season and what's it like being Angler of the Year, and has that changed things for you in your career, and how so?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a whirlwind, to be honest with you. Once it all happened, in September out at Ottertail, it was kind of a whirlwind. It was a big relief. I got to relax, for a few weeks, and then it was like, we need you to interview this or do that or do this. So, it was a busy off season for sure, but it was really cool to experience that. And, it just geared you up more for the next year. A lot of times you get done with the season and you're kind of like, oh, that was a drag, or, yeah, it was an okay season, or yeah, it was a good season. Well, when you have an unreal season like that, you almost want to get it going up and get going again. So it was a good feeling, and we enjoyed it. We took a few family ice fishing trips to enjoy that, and then we started super early this year in March with the series. So it turned around quick, and we're rolling again.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about the beginning of the year so far this year for you.
Yeah, we actually started in Detroit, Michigan, which was an extremely tough bite. Everyone knows that the Detroit River can be some of the best fishing in the country. I mean, it really can, all those Erie walleyes can funnel up in there. Well, we were just a little bit early this year, just hadn't warmed up yet. So it was a tough bite. I mean, I ended up, I think, middle of the pack, like 65th or something like that. So it wasn't that good. I wasn't disappointed, as that was the first time I've ever been to the Detroit River. But then we headed out to Chamberlain. We just got back from Chamberlain a few weeks ago. And that Chamberlain area is really cool. I mean, everyone was catching fish. There's 140 boats, I think, is what it was. And again, though, I struggled to get onto those big fish. Last year I ended up in second place out there in Chamberlain, and this year I just didn't get onto those big females like we did the prior years. So I think there's a lot more pressure where we were fishing and stuff, and I ended up middle of the pack again. So we're sitting okay, honestly, in points. We're still in it for the year-end championship, but we got to definitely pick it up in the next couple here. So.
Sure, sure. That Chamberlain bite, Drake. How were people catching their fish out there?
Yeah, there was kind of two big bites that were going on. There was the trolling, lead core was one of the big things. It would been so windy out there that a lot of those guys, the water had dirtied up. So a lot of those trollers, were doing well pulling lead core. And then there was the typical jig bite, which I shouldn't say typical. It was a little different than this year. The fish weren't up shallow. They weren't in that 1 to 2 to 3 feet of water like they were the year before, but they were in that 8 to 10 or even like 15 to 20 feet. So it's kind of a different year. So I think that's kind of where those trollers could pick them off better when they're in that deeper water. Those trollers can really cover a lot of ground and catch a lot of those big females. So
Makes sense.
yeah.
And where's the next stop?
So now we got a little break here yet, and then we actually head to the Mississippi River, down on well, it's Prairie du Chien, where it's basically you can fish Wisconsin. We can't go into Iowa, but you can actually run all the way up to Minnesota, and fish a little bit of Minnesota too. So should be a fun event. The slot's a little
Okay,
different down there
good,
than
good,
what we
good.
were last time,
All right,
but.
Drake. Let's shift gears from tournament mode, and it's Memorial Day weekend coming up this weekend. Let's talk a little bit about, first off, where do you see us so far as a yearly progression in terms of where we're at with the walleye thing, in terms of obviously post spawn now, I'm guessing, for uh, all of our fish, at least the vast majority of them. But where do you see us calendar wise in terms of the fishing?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, most of the state, honestly, I would say had a pretty late ice out. A lot of us were still dealing with cold water temps and stuff. So the opener, I'll say it was like an okay to good opener. It wasn't outstanding by any means in a lot of the areas. But coming up, we're getting these warmer temps now. And I definitely think, come Memorial weekend, it should be lights out. I mean, especially around our area, we're going to start to get these warm temps. The weeds will start to emerge, and a lot of these fish are really going to get hungry. Some of the water temps were creeping at that 50 degrees. Some were a little warmer, some were a little less. And anytime you get to that 52 to 58 degree water temp, that's usually when those walleyes are just chowing, to beat heck. So, and we should hit that in the next couple weeks here and really turn on the bite.
Sure. What, Drake? Let's talk a little bit, if we could, to start with, going into the weekend. What kind of areas should we target? What should we look for? You talk about the weed growth coming a little bit. Walk us through. We're on a natural lake, Minnesota Midwestern natural lake. Where should we be looking for those walleyes on this coming Memorial Day weekend?
I think, like I mentioned, the weeds. I would focus anywhere from that, 5 to 6, all the way out to 10 to 12 feet. That's where a lot of our lakes have those natural cabbage beds and stuff. And I wouldn't go much deeper than that. A lot of times with that 52 to 58 degree water temp, the shiners are up shallow, the perch are starting to go shallow, and that's what those fish are feeding on. So anytime you get those temperatures, I wouldn't focus on anything deeper than that 12 to 15. Look in those weeds, and I think you're definitely going to have a good bite. Anywhere, that there's points or inside corners with that stuff, especially.
Okay. Okay. Drake, a little bit. Talk about, um, you talked about points and inside corners. Are you talking about, points and corners shoreline related still, or are we talking offshore stuff yet, or what's your thought there?
No, I like you kind of mentioned. Offshore stuff generally is later in the year. This time of year, any of the rivers that are or creeks that are flowing into the lake, that's where those fish were spawning, and now they're just starting to make their way, out into the lake. So I would definitely focus on any shoreline stuff. I'm not saying that they're not on humps and stuff, but this time of year, typically those fish are on the shoreline, on gradual shorelines. Don't look on the steep ones. They're on nice gradual flats because they're just kind of out there roaming, and they're just starting to kind of get excited about that shiner bite, and they'll start chasing those shiner schools out on the flats. I mean, me and you have both done it on Ottertail where you can just kind of wander around there and get those fish up on those flats. So, it's one of those things where I wouldn't look out on the humps yet. Stick to those shorelines, any points or inside corners, like I said, where those fish can kind of stack up and ambush those shiner minnows when the wind is right.
So, how important, Drake, is you mentioned those roaming shiner schools up on those flats? Um, is that something you see on all lakes, or is it specific to certain style of lakes? What's your thought on that?
Yeah, I kind of go back and forth about it. I think it's changing now with the zebra mussels. I mean, and I'm still learning. Don't get me wrong. I think a lot of those shiner schools are in most of the lakes. Is there more in others? Yeah, absolutely. But a lot of times, when people are trapping or you talk to the trappers, a lot of those guys are catching perch in with the shiners and stuff. So if your lake has more perch, for example, I'm still not scared to go shallow. Once the water temps warm up and stuff, then it's a different story. But for the next couple weeks here, I mean, those perch are going to move up shallow just with the shiner minnows, and a lot of times the big perch are actually chewing on those spot tails too because it's a nice easy meal for them. So. It's one of those things that I think it's important, early in the year here where you can focus on those things.
Agreed. Agreed. 100%. Let's shift gears now, Drake, and let's talk. Um, okay, so we kind of know the areas that we're going to target. How important is wind direction, presence of wind? You referenced zebra mussels and clear water a little bit. How big of a factor is wind?
Yeah, it's it's becoming one of those things. You were always taught, to fish the windy shoreline and stuff, but that's changing too. Um, I noticed it. Let's see, Saturday, what it wasn't so bad, or I didn't notice it as much, where the fish were just kind of there and they're feeding. On Sunday, I ended up fishing one spot where the wind was pumping up in there. It was a nice strong wind. The fish were just chewing. I mean, you could throw up there and pitch a jig, and they were crushing it. We thought, what, let's just try a different area. The wind was blowing off of there, and for some reason the fish were there. I could see them with the depth finder and the live scope, but they wouldn't bite. And I think if that wind would have changed just a little bit and started pushing up in there, it pushes that bait up in there and it gets those fish active, and biting. So, there's a few things that I will say with wind here real shortly. We always want it crashing in. I mean, there's one of those things, but a lot of our lakes in Minnesota have so much bait in them, whether it's shiners, bluegills, perch, you name it, sucker minnows, whatever. A lot of times those fish kind of get a little bit lazy, and if the wind is blowing, up on a point and off of a point, that backside, you got to remember, can be good too at times. So they're not always on that front side. Yeah, they're probably the most aggressive fish over there, but a lot of times those fish are looking for an easy meal. They'll wait for the wind to crash up on a point on the deep side, and you'll get them on the back side. So, we were always taught, the front side, but make sure to definitely check that backside. Now, I think a lot of those fish are learning with this clear water that they can get a lot of bait, on the backside and eat an easy meal.
Drake, let's shift gears now from location, and that's some great insight on location and presence of bait fish and wind and all that. But let's talk now. How are you going to catch them? What methods? Give me your top two methods, I guess, for this time of the year.
Jigging and jigging. No, honestly, at this time of year, I mean, it's the best time that you can get them on a jig and a minnow or a jig and a plastic. So if I can get them like that when it's the cold water and stuff, that's what I'm doing. Whether it's dragging or pitching or snapping, you're going to kind of have to tell on the day. Um, a few of the things that I've noticed with this clearer water, a lot of the times they don't like it snapped quite as hard as we used to snap it. They like it just kind of floating there. So if I can pitch a jig or just kind of float a jig around, I mean, that's going to be my favorite. And then second, honestly, is probably Lindy rigging. I mean, as soon as that jig bite, you can kind of tell it's starting to die. Well, that Lindy rig bite can be phenomenal too. And not only with that, with minnows, but I mean, a lot of the crawlers and the plastic crawlers that we're coming out with these days. I mean, it's one of those things where they're starting to chow on those. We're finding that we can go faster with them and cover more ground and get more bites with them. So if I can have a jig in my hand or a Lindy rig, I mean, that's one of my favorite things. Obviously, if I can throw a jig and a swim bait, I mean, I'm one happy camper, and I'm casting and being aggressive when I'm fishing.
Good. Let's talk more, Drake. We'll get into the specifics of each of these techniques, but talk more about that jig and swim bait, size, jig size, swim bait, color, that kind of stuff, if you would.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's two different theories on it, and it kind of depends on the day. To be honest with you, there's the light one, which is a 16th and eighth. Super light. You're just kind of floating it over the weeds. You're floating it over. You're halfway down in the water column. And then there's the heavier one, which is more aggressive. We have a 3/8 ounce, maybe a half ounce, with a 3.75, 3.25, 3.5 inch, Strike King Rage Swimmer, or the Salmo Slick Shed. I know we've talked a lot about the Slick Shed as of late because of how many fish I've been catching on it. But that profile early in the year, I wouldn't go much bigger than that. 3 inch or smaller. It's going to be best for that type of thing.
So, Drake, talk about colors on those swim baits. What are your favorites as far as the color selection?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, honestly, I'm gonna start with a white or a pearl or as my first ones. I mean, there's something about this clear water around here that those fish are keying on that white pretty drastically. If I'm gonna go to a second one, it's gonna be like a blue and a silver, blue back, silver belly. I mean, that's always a good standby. And then third would probably be like a green pumpkin or an IU type color. Those are always a good standby to catch those walleyes too.
Drake, that's good stuff regarding colors. What about rods and reels and line? I know that the line choices with the fluorocarbon and the braids, and of course traditional mono that we have. That people are always wondering what kind of line. So talk about that if you would, rod and reel and line choices for the swim baits.
Yeah. A lot of times when I have that lighter jig on, to be honest with you, I'm kind of a goofy duck, and I'm using that 6 pound fluorocarbon a lot of the time. There's just something to how it floats there, and I just kind of want it to be more natural. When I step it up to that 3/8 half, I'm being more aggressive. That's when I want my braids, my super lines, with a fluorocarbon leader. That's when you're being aggressive. You're ripping it off the weeds, and you don't want it to be as natural looking. You want it kind of more of a reaction bite. So, there's two kind of things there, and I'm using anywhere from 10 to 14 pound test. I will say I'm kind of leaning more towards that heavier line, and I don't know why that I like that so much, but as of late I've been using that more, and it seems to be not affecting the fish as much. And One other thing that I never thought I would do, and it's kind of gone against what me and you have talked about a lot, is I'm using bright, ugly colored lines so I can see that line. As
Yep.
much as, it's one of those things where you don't necessarily think of it, but I'm using those bright orange or bright green or bright yellow lines, and it's easier to see, and it's not affecting my fish, and I'm loving it.
Yeah. And trust me, Drake, the older you get, the more you'll appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Exactly. Exactly.
So, maybe for our viewers, I guess. So the thought is because of the floral, the light floral, a little more stretch gives it a little more natural presentation when you want that light jig, but then that no stretch braid helps you impart more of that erratic action when you're trying to force that reaction bite. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly, you pretty much nailed it on the head there, and I know we're going to get to it, but definitely the rod choice, which I'm sure you're going to get to here, but that 610 lose rod I use for both of these situations. It's one of the most versatile rods out there. So it works, for both these situations where I have that fluorocarbon on there. It's enough of a tip where I can feel that bite, kind of give them the rod and cross their eyes. Yet when I'm being more aggressive and I'm snapping it and everything, I can pick up a ton of line when I feel them tick that swim bait, ripping it off a cabbage weed. So it's one of those things where that's definitely an important part too.
Right. I find myself, Drake, more and more picking up that 610 for a
Yeah.
lot of different things. And, not only is it a versatile rod, but, cork handle, IM8 graphite, and at a really great price point too. So people can pick up, two, three of the rods and be ready with different lines.
Yeah. It was funny. My co-angler at, at Chamberlain is like, well, which rod should I pick? And I'm like, well, the 610. And he goes, well, literally they're all 610. I'm like, yep, grab one. That'll be perfect. So yeah, I
Yep.
just find myself gravitating towards that all the time. And there's something about that rod that I really like.
Sure, sure. Makes a lot of sense. So talk, Drake, a little bit. You talked about the jigs, both with the lighter setup and the heavier setup. Talk about your Lindy Rig setup then. Line choice there, what kind of weight you're using, and also snell length, because obviously the live bait reel wants to know how long the snell between the
Yep.
swivel and the weight and actually out to the hook.
Yeah, yeah, and that's where honestly, that's where I lean on my monos. I'm still a mono guy when it comes to rigging. Whether it's a leech, a crawler, a minnow, a chub, whatever it may be, I'm a mono guy there. I just like the stretch. I like the forgiveness of it. So and honestly, I'm using a 6, or I might step up to an 8, but I'm still a pretty light, light guy, line guy there. If I'm fishing a river or something, obviously it's heavier, but there's something about, like, I keep talking about this natural floating thing. The clearer this water gets, the more natural you got to look. And so that's where, that 6 or 8 really floats well. And like you said, I'm only using an eighth or a quarter ounce lead weight in front of that. I find myself, I never thought I would, but I'm using tungsten more and more. Um, you know, as far as Lindy rigging, one, for I can feel bottom, but also it's smaller profile, so those fish can't see it. It's one of those things where they might be looking at it. I don't know, but I like that I can feel every rock or weed or whatever I'm going through. So it's one of those things.
Hmm.
As far as leader length, I usually start, at 6 foot and go longer. I don't like to be outrageous and get to a 10 or 12, but I would say 4 to 7 footer is what is a good leader. The longer the leader, the more, free floating that minnow can be when you're doing it. So that helps. But at some point it gets a little ridiculous. Some guys were using 12 and 14-foot leaders. You got to be kidding me. There's no way I could do that, so it's one of those things.
Sure, sure. What about hooks? Color hook, size hook, that kind of thing.
Honestly, with a minnow, I'm a small hook guy. I mean, I use a number 4 or a number 2. If I'm having a bigger chub hook, I'll step up to a 1 or a 1/0. But that's only for chubs. If I can get away with a 4 day in and day out for minnows, that's what I'm using. If I'm downsizing on my Lindy rigs to a crawler or a leech, then I'm honestly going to a 6. I might step down to an 8, but an 8 starts to get really small. So I like that a 6 can bury in a crawler and be inside the body basically. And then on a leech can still, free float and swim very well with a number 6 hook. So I'll say
Sure.
that's kind of where I'm at. I don't know. What are you at? You kind of similar? Or?
Yeah, yeah. I kind of err on, like you said, with the minnows, a 2 and a 4, and then I go to a 6 most of the time with the crawler or leech.
Yeah.
I like to be small in the hook because I just think it gives it the more natural presentation. And, a spot tail shiner with a smaller hook is going to swim better than he is with a heavier hook,
Yeah.
obviously.
And then as far as color, I don't know. Me and you have debated this a lot. There's a few colors that we like to use. I mean, red hook is good, a black hook, and then you have your chartreuses and orange. There's no doubt there's certain days where there's something about the chartreuse and orange hook where they're good, but day in and day out, I either have a black or a red hook on for the most part. I would say.
Sure, sure. Okay, let's talk rods and reel setup for your Lindy rigs.
Yeah. I kind of, if I can, I got them set up here almost. I've been kind of scrambling here and stuff. But there's a 7 foot, 7.2, that I like either one of those two. Both are great rods. And like I said, I use the 6 pound, 8 pound test on that. And I'll use the longer one when I start doing more leeches and crawlers. I think it just gives it a little bit more forgiveness. The leech and crawler bite is a different bite than a minnow bite where they just kind of chomp on it and like it's much more ferocious, I would say. So then I'll go up to that size. So um, it's one of those things that those two are kind of the ones that I like for that setup. Yet I can weasel those fish out of the weeds pretty easy.
Sure, sure. What reels are you using, Drake?
Um, I kind of gone back and forth. I was always the custom pros and stuff. I started to gravitate a little bit towards some other ones. Obviously they came out with the new hyper mags. I'm just trying to see if you had any sitting out, but I really don't. Um, the custom pros are kind of what I've leaned on, and I like the smaller ones. I'll argue with guys about this as for whether how much line I want to pick up and stuff. If I'm throwing a jig or a swim bait, I will use the bigger size reel. If I'm just snapping a jig or dragging a Lindy rig, then I'm using the smaller ones because I'm not necessarily worried about how much line I'm picking up because I'm just dragging it back there. If I have to, then I'll step up to that bigger size reel.
So Drake, thanks. I mean, that's great stuff, both on the jigging, and also, of course, some really good details on Lindy rig fishing as well. Final thoughts on the weekend?
Yeah, I mean, it should be a great weekend. I mean, the water temp is warming up, but definitely in the Alexandria Lakes area. Make sure to take a look. Even anywhere in kind of the central Minnesota area, Big Stone, Traverse are great areas too. It's one of those times a year where you should be able to go out on any of the lakes now and start to really hammer on these walleyes, crappies and bass too alike. But we're definitely focusing on those walleyes these next couple weeks because it's some of the best fishing that you're going to have all year long. So I appreciate you having me on. If anyone's ever got any questions, feel free to reach out. Glad to help as much as I possibly can. And I'm sure I'll see you out on the water here in the next couple weeks because we usually run into each other a lot over the next few. So,
Yep, sounds good. Thanks, Drake. We really appreciate
yep,
it.
not a problem.
All right, there you have them, folks. That was Drake Hurd, the 2021 National Walleye Tour Angler of the Year. Drake is a Strike King Lose Pro from Alexandria, Minnesota, with some great thoughts on Memorial Day weekend, holiday weekend walleyes coming up this weekend. Should be a good bite in lots of places across the Midwest, and Drake's got some really, really good insight there for our listeners and viewers regarding the nuts and bolts of how to find walleyes this time of the year, and then also some really, really good stuff on different methods to target these fish and catch them now in the coming days. So now, let's stay in Alexandria, Minnesota. Let's go to Christopherson's Bait, and we're going to welcome in from Christopherson's Shane Gesell. Shane is one of the managers at Christopherson Bait. Shane, welcome to Taiwan On.
Hey, how you guys doing?
We're good. We're good. So, Shane, we're 2 weeks into the fishing season, and give us a report. What have the first couple weekends been like in terms of the walleye bite and the panfish bite?
We're definitely off to a slower start, compared to, the normal opener. We late spring. It's been cold. We had that nasty weather roll through right before the fishing opener. I think that hampered a lot of guys' plans for the weekend. It
Mm-hmm.
also dirtied up the water, which made the bite a little tougher. And then, last weekend it was, still cold. We had some wind. So it hasn't been ideal conditions. That being said, guys are finding some walleyes. They're, just coming off the spawn. So they're starting to, put the feed bag on. And then, the panfish are just starting to want to move up shallow for the crappies to spawn and to feed as well.
Right. So really, Shane, what we need to get the walleye bite really firing is some warm, stable weather, and the same to move the crappies and the bluegills up, correct?
Yeah, we just need some consistent temperatures out there so the water has a, chance to warm up and we get some stable conditions. Those fish will really turn on, and they'll turn on quick.
Sure. So we could, depending on what happens now in these next couple days before the weekend, we could be primed for a pretty good bite on this holiday weekend.
Yeah, I think it's gearing up to, be a good fishing weekend, as, weather permitting, of course. But the temperatures look good. The forecast looks okay as of right now, and if that all stays that way, I think it's going to be an excellent fishing weekend. I think the fish will really be biting.
Awesome. So, Shane, I always tell folks when we talk about Christopherson's Bait in Alexandria that if you come through the Alexandria area and you like to fish and you don't stop at Christopherson's, you're not doing yourself a favor, because you guys have, just a tremendous selection of rods, reels, bait, tackle for multi-species, whether it be walleyes, bass, panfish, muskies, you name it. But Shane, let's talk right now about live bait availabilities, because I know the guys are going to want the spot tail shiner still this weekend. Some people are starting to fish leeches now. I'm sure you've been asked that question 100 times. What are the availabilities of those two species in particular?
So it's hit or miss on both of them, honestly. Shiners we've had in and out these first, 10, 14 days of the season. I think we'll be able to get spot tails and goldies as far as the shiners go for the weekend. Whether I'll get as many as I want and if they'll last the weekend, it's hard to say. They go quick. Leeches too. That's all weather dependent. How good they trap. I've had some. Now the last few days. But we had some cold temps, and especially where they get trapped, the cold temps, that always shuts that leech trapping down. So I'm not getting the numbers. I'm not getting the size that I really want yet for those, especially for the walleye guys. They are always after those big ones. But
Right.
I will have some availability for Memorial Weekend.
How about the panfish size leeches? Are you okay there?
I haven't got the real small ones in yet. It's been a lot of the mixed stuff, the medium, the large. I'll be looking, hopefully here the next day or two to get some, just strictly panfish leeches in though for those guys as well.
Okay. So if someone's coming into the Alexandria area, if they get in, Thursday evening or Friday evening, they probably need to stop in right away if they want in on the shiner deal, because like you said, you're going to have some, but who knows if you're going to have enough to last.
Yeah, if you're looking to get in on the shiner deal for sure, get in. Usually our shipment comes in on Friday. I'd get in pretty quick. Like, you can always give us a call and we'll have more of an idea of how many we'll have and how long they're going to last. That's
Sure.
honestly the best thing to do. I can tell you if you need to rush in or if you're good to wait until you're heading out.
Okay. So let's talk, Shane, you're an outstanding fisherman. You and I have fished together several times. You've been one of our guests on Fishing the Midwest, and that's one of the things that I really admire and like about Christopherson's bait is that the guys and gals who work there fish, and so you guys really have a handle on what's going on. Plus, your product knowledge is really second to none. If I'm walleye fishing this weekend, tell me what if it's you, what baits are you using?
I mean, if I'm walleye fishing this weekend, I'm still sticking with a jig and a minnow.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that be a shiner or a fathead or honestly a jig and a plastic. I do a lot of that, and that is very effective as well. But I think that's your best bet at covering a lot of water and finding where these fish are. And like I said, they're going to be shallow on a lot of these lakes.
Mm-hmm.
And for me personally, I think that's just, especially this time of year, that's just your best bet.
Right. And in terms of, because of water to clarity, and I've fished with you enough to know, Shane, that you like to pitch that jig. Those fish in the shallow water and us having a lot of clear waters, not just in the Alexandria area, but across the Midwest, pitching, getting that bait away from the boat can be a big deal, can it?
Yeah, you honestly have to do that now. Especially around here, I don't ever vertical jig anymore. I just don't do it.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, it's so clear you can't be seeing these fish. They can't be seeing you. You'll never get them to bite. So you got to be away from the boat, and that's just how you got to do it to get bit.
Right, right. Okay, so let's talk. You said that plastic bite can be, something that can be really good. Let's talk a little bit about the particulars of that. What plastic should I buy, and then how do I fish it?
So what I always do is I'm fishing, some kind of a paddle tail swim bait, on any lead head jig. I always use small tungsten lead head jigs or some kind of 1/8 ounce somewhere in there with a little bit longer shank because I like a little bit bigger bait, a 3.5, 4 inch paddle tail swim bait. How I fish it, a lot of guys saying swim bait, you got to just cast retrieve. I don't find myself doing that at all usually.
Mm-hmm.
I still fish it, with pitching and then, jigging it and working it back to the boat. But that paddle tail still on that fall still has that, the paddle tail action where it's
Mm-hmm.
fluttering all the way down. That gets those fish attention. A lot of times they'll grab it as it's falling back towards the bottom. So I'm not a cast or retrieve kind of guy with it. I'm a pitch it just like I'm pitching a jig in a minnow, but it's got a different action than that. And those fish don't see that swim bait as often as they're seeing a jig and a fathead, for instance.
Right, right. So you're snapping that jig up and letting that paddle tail activate on the fall.
Exactly. Yep.
So Rage Swimmer, that style bait, that's what you're talking about?
Yep. That's exactly what I'm talking about.
Okay, awesome. How about color? Thoughts on color?
Yeah, so color, with the clear water, I don't like anything too bright. I stick to, any kind of, shad color. Some, whites are good.
Sure.
Just, something neutral, or, that gives off a little purple flake or blue flake, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Usually works pretty good.
Right, right. Okay, let's shift gears. I'm targeting crappies in the shallows. These crappies now moving up to feed, spawn not too far away. But how would you target those fish?
For the crappies, I'd be starting with a small plastic. So Striking makes those shad poles, Slabalicious, something along those lines, because that allows me to cover water, kind of find the areas that they're going to be. And if I want to slow down and do a slip bobber with a small jig and a minnow or a small grub or something like that, that's always an option once you kind of get them dialed in.
Mm-hmm.
But to start, like I said, I'd be throwing some kind of a small moving bait.
So you're going to cast it and slowly work it back.
Yep. Cast, small, light jig, and just slow retrieve back to the boat.
Yeah. And then, like you said, if you find a concentration of fish, then if you want to slow up and maybe go to some kind of a tube under a bobber or something like that, that's
exactly.
But a lot of days too, that that shad pole pick off a lot of fish out of a school before you ever have to slow up.
Yeah, honestly, I think that there's days where that shad pole and that artificial is going to get more bites than a slip bobber.
Yep.
Because they have to react to it.
Right, exactly. Where are you throwing it this weekend?
What's that?
What kind of cover? What kind of places are you going to throw?
Yeah, so any kind of weeds that are starting to come up, pencil reeds, wood cover, shorelines, just areas where they're gonna use to spawn,
Mm-hmm.
or at least close to those areas. If they're not up right on top where they're gonna spawn, I'm looking, not that much deeper. If they're gonna spawn in 2 or 4 feet and they're not there, they're gonna be 4, 6, or 8 feet.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, next anywhere by that cover where they're gonna spawn is they're gonna be somewhere close to that.
Right, right. Awesome, awesome. All right, so we've talked walleyes, we've talked panfish. Let's talk about my favorite, largemouth bass.
Yep.
Where to go, what to do this time of the year in the Alexandria area, and a lot of places across the Midwest too, because we're pre-spawn heading into that spawn for those fish in a lot of waters too. Talk about that.
Yeah, so those fish are going to be pretty shallow again too. Again, I'm going to look for them by shoreline weed cover of some sort, and I'm going to be throwing moving baits. They're going to want to chase. So bladed jig, square bill, spinner bait. Guys are having some success on that here the last few days. Stuff like that. Big profile, moving water, covering water, and just picking off those active fish.
Right, because again, a lot of those fish are up shallow. They're looking for dinner. They're hungry now. So
Exactly. Yep. Yep.
so Shane, again, and I've talked about this already, but like I said, you guys have a tremendous selection of live bait tackle, whether you're a walleye head, you're a bass head, you like chasing panfish, you got a great selection of musky gear as well. Um, I'm also really impressed. I was in the bait shop not long ago. I'm really impressed with your rod and reel selection, and you've got a couple of my favorites, new favorites, the Lou's Signature series in the Bass series, and then also the XD cranking rods, bass rods as well. Talk about those a little bit in your selection.
Yeah, so we do have a pretty good selection, of everything, but yeah, specifically that Lou's, I've got quite a few different models. That Signature series is a great one. Technique specific spinning and bait casting models. So whatever you're looking to do, bass wise, walleye wise, whatever it is, I got a rod for you there. That Lou's XD series cranking rods, I think, is honestly the nicest cranking rod on the market right now. They did a fantastic job with that. They kept the price point really reasonable. And I mean, that's just a rod, that's a lot lighter than, those glass rods for cranking and stuff like that. I'm going to be able to throw it all day and it's comfortable. I'm not going to get worn out by it.
Mm-hmm.
And then we carry, the KBD series rods, the Lou's custom speed spin walleye rods, their Wally Marshall panfish rods. I've got a rod for whatever you're looking to do.
Right, right. And in addition, not just Lou's, you guys have a tremendous selection from all the leading manufacturers as well, correct?
Yeah, I carry all the name brands, all the big ones. And every price point depending on what you're looking for. If you're just getting into it, you're not looking to break the bank. We're more than willing to help you get into the best option for whatever budget you have. I've got you covered.
Sure. And again, you've got the people in the shop that can help the consumer find exactly what she or he is looking for as well.
Yeah, myself and all the staff here, we're more than willing to, spend time with the customer and get them, as comfortable when they get out the door that they're going to have the best success. They're going to be comfortable if they're just getting into a new rod and reel.
Sure.
We're more than willing to, sit down. I mean, spend as much time as we need to help the customer in any way we can.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. Shane, as always, thanks for your time. We'll catch you up with you again later on in the summer.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
You bet. All right, folks, there it is. That's Shane Gesell. Shane, again, one of the managers at Christopherson's Bait and Tackle. Christopherson's is an independent retailer, tremendous selection of rods, reels, fishing line. They spool line, sell it in bulk, spool it there for you. All the live bait that you need, and the tackle selection, their tackle selection is as good as any that I've seen across the Midwest. So if you're in the Alexandria area, you owe it to yourself if you enjoy fishing to stop into Christopherson. All right, let's go ahead and welcome in Tim Emanuel. Tim is the general manager at Hannay's Marine in Minneapolis. Tim, welcome back to another season of Taiwan On.
How's it going there, Mikey?
Things are good. Things are good with me. Did you just call me Mikey?
I did. That's a first.
Okay. Well, I might have to bring out your nickname then, the Ice Cream Man. I was going to try.
Oh boy, here we go. Here we go.
Okay. We need to get back on track here. So, Tim, first things first. What's new in the marine industry? What's going on as far as supply, our sales, that kind of stuff?
Well, supply is kind of experiencing much of the same as we were last year. Definitely some struggles out there. We're actually doing okay with the G3 aluminum line. We do have deliveries pretty well set. We're going to be dropping some new boats here and there every couple of weeks, and kind of a little bit of a majority of everything that'll be coming in. I do have some on the show floor right now. One of the things I do have also is I've got a couple of different used bass boats in stock right now. We got a used Nitro that just came in, and two G3 bass boat Mod V style boats that are also on the show floor, used, that are ready to rock.
Okay, that's good. So, in terms of, do you still have new product on the way as well then?
Yeah, we do. One of the unique things, and there's certain manufacturers out there that are going to get you a lot of product. It's set intervals of the year. One of the things that G3 is able to do with us is that they'll pretty much be able to supply us product 12 months a year. So we'll be switching over to model year 2023 in July, and we'll have some loads of boats in July and August. So if anybody is looking for something, don't necessarily assume that if I don't have it now that you won't be able to get it, because we just got to take a look and see what we got coming in on the load sheets, and we'll be getting supplied with plenty of boats this fall before ice up.
Sure.
Crazy to think we're already talking about ice up when we barely just got ice off, but that's kind of the way it is.
Yeah, let's not rush it here, all right?
Exactly.
So, Tim, let's go back. You said that you do have, a good selection now, particularly of some 23 G3s coming. And I want to talk about two of the models. The first one I want to talk about is the 19 SF, the Angler, the one that we're now running our second year in that boat. And we were on Big Stone Lake earlier in the week. Big wind, and that boat just continues to impress me with how well it gets up on top of the waves, and it just goes, and it's a really nice riding boat. Do you attribute that to hull design, or the kind of the dual plated hull, or what is it that makes that thing such a sweet ride?
That's definitely hull design, and getting that little bit extra length really makes a big difference. I got to spend a couple more days in your boat in the latter part of the summer filming for Fishing the Midwest, and we were on Mille Lacs one of the days, and then we were out on Minnewaska the other time, and it was really windy, I believe, when the day we were out on Minnewaska. And I mean, that boat really surprises me even. Been in a lot of fiberglass boats in my day, and I would put that boat up against bunch of the 18-foot class fiberglass boats that are on the market nowadays. I spent a lot of time in the past in the 18-footer. I always liked the way that ran, and but really impressed with that 19.
Yeah, and I am too. I mean, I've had quite a bit of experience in some of the, a couple of the different 18-foot model glass boats, and you hit it on the nail on the head. I put that 19-foot G3 Sportsman right with them, and again, it's a smooth, dry ride, but with that, we've got that 200 SHO Yamaha. That thing gets up on plane right now, and it's a 52-mile-an-hour boat as well.
Yep. I know you. Your two speeds, idle and wide open.
Come on now. All right. So the other boat, Tim, that I want to talk about, and there's actually two boats in that line that are new for G3. They're the wide gunnel boats. There's a 1750 and an 1850. Talk about the differences, if you would, between that new series and, like the 19SF and the 18SF.
Sure. So we have two new boats this year, and it's 1750 and the 1850. We have those coinciding also with the AV-17 and the AV-18. The boats are very similar, but yet have some differences. What we'll say the 50 series boats, 1750, 1850, are about 4 inches taller on the sides. And they also have the wider gunnels, whereas normally you got like the 4-inch wide gunnel. I believe the gunnels are, carpeted top and about 10 inches wide on the 50 series boats. Definitely, if you're more into trolling, I think it's a little bit better set up for a trolling rig. I've shown the boat to some people that just like the extra depth because they have little kids and they want to keep the little kids in the boat. Hull design is basically the same between the two, using the same amount of lifting strakes, reverse chine underneath. All of that stuff is basically the same. So the boats are going to ride very similar. It's just how tall the sides and the width of the gunnels. Some people just like stepping on the wide gunnels also. So these were boats that we had in the past. They used to be called the 175, 185. They went away when the AV-17 and AV-18s came out, and we just kind of brought them back and updated them, brought into the newer features that we have and updated them. So actually, they've been really, really good sellers. Every one so far that we've gotten, we've been able to move right along. Some of them sold even before people were able to see an example of one. So it's really cool to see.
And we're actually at Fishing the Midwest. We're going to be running an 1850 later on this summer, so we'll have an idea, get some actual in the boat time in it. It'll be fun to see that boat and see how it performs. And like you said, the wider gunnel and a little bit deeper, and to some people that really appeals to them. The other thing, Tim, that I'd like to say is, in that 19SF, the storage for tackle, there's a ton of tackle storage, and the center rod storage handles a bunch of rods as well. So not only is it a smooth riding, dry boat, but in terms of fishing features, it's really set up nice as well.
One of the things we really like to stress, this is one of the things that G3 I think does better than anybody on the market, is that those front storage compartments are truly they're binned compartments, and they are dry storage. And none of the other aluminum manufacturers on the market have really even tried to tackle doing it, and G3 does it, and it actually does work. It never had a customer complain about getting water in any of those front compartments.
And that's awesome, because there's nothing worse than having a boat that allows you to go out on big water. It keeps you dry, but then if it rains, everything ends up wet anyway. That's not the case with these boats, and like you said,
exactly.
That's an awesome feature. Yeah. So, Tim, let's switch base from the G3 a little bit, and let's talk about some of the other lines of boats that Hannay's Marine handles as well. Talk about those a little bit.
Sure. The Crest pontoons have been really good sellers for us. Once again, we're basically, technically right now, out of inventory. Got a lot of boats here, but pretty much everything's going to be getting moved along and delivered here for Memorial Weekend. We will be seeing loads of Crest coming in July that will all be for sale. We do have a bunch of boats right now that are going to be allocated out in the middle of the summer that are available. Right now with the Arcraft Bass Cat line, we had a really good year with them. Right now, most of our boats coming in right now are already pre-sold. I do have a 209 TFX SP Yarcraft on my floor that is available. And that's what I have right now. It's going to be a little while before I restock with the Arcraft Bass Cat line.
Good. And Tim, if you would, before we let you go, you talked about used boats. We've talked obviously now about new boats. Talk about your parts department and your service department as well, if you would.
Parts and service have been going strong. Service department, we're booked out a little ways right now, so definitely if you need to get something done, give us a call as soon as you can to get on the schedule. Parts were we did a lot of work to our parts department over the off season and updated and redesigned a bunch of the aisles. Brought in a bunch of new parts and sent back a bunch of stuff that wasn't selling. So definitely got a new fresh look in the parts department. It's worth taking a drive over to take a look and see all the new stuff we have on the shelves.
Sounds good. Tim, last thing before I let you go, give us your website address and tell us your hours of operation right now.
www.hannaysmarine.com, and phone number is 612-781-7411. Currently, summer hours, we're open Mondays and Thursdays from 9 to 7, Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday from 9 to 6, and then we're open Saturdays from 9 to 1.
Awesome. Well, there you have it, folks. That is Tim, the Ice Cream Man Emanuel from Hannay's Marine in Minneapolis, and we'll have Tim on as a regular guest as well to update us on what's new and what's happening in the marine industry. Well, folks, that takes us to about the end of our very first Taiwan podcast for 2022. Now, I'd like to let you know who's going to be our pro guest next week, but that's still up in the air a little bit. A lot of the pros right now are busy with their tournament season, but we have had contact with Mark Zona, guys like Greg Hackney, Kevin Van Dam. Some of those guys we're hopeful that we're going to be able to bring some of those guys back again this year. Last year we had Denny Brower on as well, Mr. Crappie, Wally Marshall. So we've got a really good field of potential guests. It's just now we need to nail one down, and we haven't been able to finalize for next week yet. But I promise you that we will have a top-notch walleye, bass, or crappie pro, and we will talk all things fishing across the Midwest. I'm Mike Frisch. I'm the host of Fishing the Midwest TV, and of course the host of the Taiwan podcast. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you again next week, and as always, remember to include a youngster in your next outdoors adventure.